Hey guys, tonight we tumble through time back to the soft morning fog of Mount Selene, where something very small and very sneaky is already in motion. The sky is the color of sheep's milk, and the mountain air smells faintly like wet stone and goat fur. Down among the mossy rocks, a baby, yes, a literal newborn, is already plotting a heist. He stretches, yawns, and casually prepares to invent both lies and music before the sun's even fully up. You're here to witness it all. You probably won't survive this. Mostly because if you try to pull half of what Hermes does today, your mom's gonna ground you until the Bronze Age ends. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know which corner of the cosmos you're dozing off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are tiny. Not physically, but your perspective, your footsteps, your breath. You crouch at the edge of a cavern wrapped in morning shadows where Maya the nymph is passed out on a bed of leaves. She's glowing slightly like all nymphs do, especially after childbirth. And there squirming in the soft folds of woven cloth is her newborn son, Hermes. Here's the thing, this kid's not normal. He's a god, yes, but more importantly, he's a little too awake for someone who was literally born yesterday. By the time you blink twice, he's already scooted out of his swaddle. He stretches his arms, sneezes cutely, and promptly starts walking. He does not crawl. Crawling is for babies. Hermes walks. In fact, he struts. His first destination, a nearby hill where a herd of goats is chewing cud in the exact sort of slow, indifferent way that makes them ideal side characters in a caper. Hermes eyes them with mischief. Then, and this is real myth logic, he steals one. Not because he's hungry, not because he's bored, but because he has plans. And those plans start with crafting. Hermes is what you'd get if MacGyver and a jazz musician had a baby raised by raccoons. He finds an empty tortoiseshell, stares at it like it owes him money, and mutters something under his breath. Then he hollows it out, pokes holes in it, and begins stringing bits of sinew and goat gut across it like a demented harp maker. At this point, you're just following the sounds, twangy plucks, occasional giggles, and the rhythmic tapping of a kid with no business being this good at inventing things. Hermes plays with it once, just one lazy chord, and somehow music is born. Historically, the lyre became one of the most iconic instruments in ancient Greece. It's not as dramatic as a war chariot or as tasty as olives, but the lyre shows up everywhere. Poems, temples, coins, and sweaty Greek boys pretending they're better than they are at poetry contests. What's wild is scholars still argue whether the lyre's origin was entirely mythological, or if Hermes' story represents an allegory for how early humans discovered musical harmony through natural materials. There's even fringe speculation that early string instruments were inspired by the twangy sounds of animal tendons drying in the sun. Ancient people just didn't have Spotify, okay? Back to the baby. Hermes isn't done. He tests out his new instrument. A note here. A playful riff there. Even the goat stopped chewing to listen. The one he borrowed sort of bobs its head, which you take as a goat-style standing ovation. Then, with a satisfied hum and a shrug that says, "Time to get into more trouble," Hermes tucks the lyre under one arm like a school project and turns his gaze southward toward the pastures where Apollo's sacred cattle are grazing. Because music's great, but trickery is better. You trail behind him, not quite sure whether to laugh or file a divine restraining order. Hermes, this absurdly self-assured toddler, doesn't just walk, he prances. Every step is pure drama, and he's already plotting his next move, stealing 50 of Apollo's sacred cows. Because obviously a lyre made from tortoise and goat guts isn't enough chaos for one morning. The sun is barely peeking over the olive trees when Hermes reaches the plains of Pieria. There, grazing contentedly and blissfully unaware of their fate, are Apollo's cattle. Not guarded, of course. Why would the god of the sun suspect that a newborn thief would be gunning for his livestock? That's not even a category on the divine insurance forms. Now Hermes could just steal the cows. That would already be a feat of petty mischief worthy of a slow clap from Hades himself. But no, Hermes decides he's going to invent reverse footprints. Yes, really. He gathers some bark-soft leaves, and maybe some of that tortoiseshell residue recycling is important, and crafts himself a pair of sandals that make it look like the wearer is walking backward. It's reverse psychology for feet. And then, because why not, he puts the same sandal design on the cows, all 50 of them. You are now herding cows backward through a pine forest, led by a giggling baby god who hums lyre melodies and occasionally stops to tie leaves around the cows' tails for aesthetic purposes. The cows are somehow compliant. Either Hermes has magical cow charisma, or they're too confused to rebel. Historical side note, in real ancient Greece, cattle were a serious flex. If you had cows, you had wealth. They were walking banks giving milk meat and status. That's why stealing Apollo's herd isn't just mischief, it's an economic strike. Imagine robbing a god's trust fund before your umbilical cord has finished healing. Now comes the hiding part. Hermes finds a grotto dark and echoing nestled in the hills. The cows are ushered in and silenced with a look. You're standing in the back surrounded by sleepy bovines and echoes of hoofsteps that never happened. The whole place smells like adventure and cow farts. But Hermes, he's already halfway home. He returns to Maya's cave, tiptoes in like the world's most smug toddler, and wriggles back into his blanket. He arranges his limbs into the most innocent cherubic pose possible. Then he yawns. Loudly. You know to really sell it. Minutes later, Maya peeks in and sees her son sleeping peacefully. She doesn't notice the tortoiseshell Lyre peeking out from under his blanket, or the faint whiff of cow on his breath. Historians still argue whether the Hermes cattle myth was meant to illustrate the origin of music divine trade, or just chaotic toddler energy. Some say it reflects the ancient Greek admiration for cleverness and trickery. Others argue it was a warning, don't trust babies, especially musical ones. One lesser-known theory even suggests the lyre and the cattle are symbolically linked, representing the transition from pastoral life to civilized art. But again, we're talking about a myth where goat guts and backwards sandals are plot devices, so maybe don't overthink it. Back in the cave, Hermes can barely suppress his grin. He plucks one note on the lyre so soft, so subtle, and lets it echo once through the stone chamber. It's a victory chord, and it sounds suspiciously like trouble. So here you are curled up at the edge of Maya's cave watching a newborn god cradle the world's first lyre like it's a plush toy. Hermes is practically glowing with satisfaction. The tortoise shell is polished now, reflecting faint candlelight, and the sheep gut strings hum with a weird sort of tension, like they know this is only the beginning. You lean in closer as Hermes tunes the instrument. Not because you know anything about tuning, let's be honest. You probably haven't even tuned your shoelaces in weeks, but because there's something hypnotic about the way he handles it. A pluck here, a twang there. It's not music yet, but it wants to be. Then he starts playing, and it's weirdly beautiful. The kind of melody that makes you think of cool rivers and lonely hills and goats dancing in the moonlight. You don't know how you know, but you know this is the first time sound has made feelings instead of just noise. Historically speaking, the lyre would become central to Greek life. Used in education and ceremonies, even in competitive music contests, yes, ancient Greece had Battle of the Bands, this strange little harp thing, held massive cultural sway. Students were taught to play as part of a complete education. It was like gym class, but for feelings. Now back to Hermes, who's clearly trying to decide whether to name his new creation or just play it until it becomes legend. But before he can get too smug, the air inside the cave ripples. Someone's noticed the cows are missing. A sunbeam cuts through the entrance like a divine spotlight, and standing in it is Apollo. His face somewhere between, I've lost my cows and I'm going to burn a baby. Hermes, still cradling the lyre, blinks up at him. Then, in the most deliciously unhinged move of all, he starts crying. Loudly, like wailing. He babbles nonsense. He insists he's only a baby. He pretends he doesn't know what a cow is. And Apollo's not buying it. He stomps over golden curls practically vibrating with rage and points at the tortoiseshell. What's that? Hermes blinks, a toy. Quirky tidbit here. Ancient Greek myths love this moment, the clever mortal or demigod, tricking a more powerful figure. It's not just comic relief, it's admiration for wit over brute strength. And Hermes, he's playing this scene like a symphony. Apollo hauls him off to Mount Olympus like an indignant babysitter, taking a sugar-high toddler to the principal's office. You're floating behind them now, drifting through clouds that smell faintly of cedar and lightning. The gods are gathered. Zeus is lounging in a chair that's 30% throne, 70% drama. He looks at Apollo, he looks at Hermes, he sighs. And the trial begins. But don't expect a normal court case. There's no jury, no gavel. Just gods throwing accusations like lightning bolts, and Hermes pretending to be the world's most innocent infant. He blames the cows, he blames gravity. At one point, he blames the breeze. Historians still debate whether this mythical trial represents the origin of divine justice, or just a playful metaphor for how chaotic forces like music and trade eventually get sanctioned by authority. Either way, it's one of the few myths where Zeus doesn't smite someone, he just kind of chuckles. And when Hermes finally hands over the lyre and plays one perfect song, the whole room falls silent. Even Hera stops passive-aggressively glaring at everyone. Even Ares forgets to flex. Apollo, despite himself, is mesmerized. You watch as the god of music realizes he wants that instrument more than revenge. And Hermes. He's ready to bargain. Apollo's eyes are locked on the lyre now, like a cat seeing a shiny fish. The sun god Golden Regal, slightly singed around the ego, doesn't just want the lyre, he needs it. You can almost hear the gears turning behind that perfectly symmetrical forehead. This isn't about cows anymore, it's about art, about beauty, about sibling rivalry but with strings. Hermes senses it too. You watch as he straightens up, still technically a baby, but suddenly carrying himself like a Wall Street negotiator with a nap schedule. He strums a few notes just enough to hook Apollo deeper, then stops and says, "Tell you what, I give you this and you forget about the cows." Apollo raises an eyebrow. "You stole from me." Hermes shrugs. "You'll live. I made this." And right there in the middle of the divine courtroom, the most lopsided trade in mythic history happens. 50 divine cows in exchange for one goat gut lyre. Apollo agrees. Zeus raises his eyebrows but doesn't interfere, probably too busy enjoying the absurdity of it all. Apollo takes the lyre, reverently cradles it like it's made of light and prophecy, and begins to pluck. You can feel it in your ribcage. This is what the lyre was meant for. Under Apollo's fingers, it's not just an instrument anymore, it's a channel. A mirror of the universe set to music. Meanwhile, Hermes casually strolls over to his mother's seat and picks up a random twig from the floor. He mutters something about balance and vibes and bam. Just like that, the twig turns into a golden rod, entwined with two snakes, the caduceus. One of the most famous symbols in all of mythology, medicine, and questionable tattoos. Fun fact. The caduceus, though often confused with the rod of Asclepius, which has only one snake, was originally a symbol of trade negotiation and, yep, Hermes himself. Perfect for a god whose first act of communication was lying about livestock. But the real twist, Hermes doesn't stop there. He adds a bonus to sweeten the deal, a golden olive tree freshly summoned from nothing roots and all. He offers it to Apollo as a peace branch. Or maybe just to show off. Either way, the gods are officially impressed. Historians still argue whether this tale marks the formal rise of Hermes from trickster nuisance to legitimate Olympian player. Was the lyre incident a divine test? A prank that accidentally forged art? Or just another metaphor for how music often springs from chaos? You can't help but notice that in the same breath, Hermes created theft and negotiation invention. And music all before he was old enough to pronounce responsibility. Apollo still strumming smiles despite himself. The courtroom dissipates in golden haze. Zeus mutters something about needing a nap. Hera rolls her eyes and leaves. You float quietly in their wake, the hum of the lyre trailing behind you like sunlight caught in a bottle. By now the cows are back to grazing, probably confused, and Hermes, he's grinning. Not because he got away with it, though he absolutely did, but because the world now has music. And even the gods didn't see that coming. And tucked in the back of this entire myth, unnoticed and barely footnoted, is the goat. Yeah, that goat. The one Hermes first played for. The one that tapped its hoof in time and maybe swayed a little when the notes hit right. You remember it now. Its ears perked, its gaze unbothered, and for a moment, just a moment, it almost seemed to smile. So here you are, back on the hillside again, where the sky is a pale swirl of honey and pearl, and everything smells faintly like thyme and goat sweat. Hermes is lounging in the grass, plucking absently at a blade like it's a harp string, while that goat, yes, the same one from earlier, is staring at him like it knows something. You sit beside it. It's got wise eyes, the kind of eyes that say, "Yeah, I've seen a baby god invent music and lie in the same breath. What of it?" And you start to wonder, how much credit does the goat get? In most versions of the myth, this goat is nameless, faceless, just part of the scenery. But if you look a little closer in older rural tales whispered by herders and wine-soaked poets, you'll find hints that this goat was more than just a passive bystander. Some say the goat tapped its hooves to help Hermes keep rhythm. Others insist it bleated in harmony its wavering vibrato, inspiring the tremolo technique of early lyre players. There's even a fringe theory, no joke, that this goat was semi-divine, a forgotten minor spirit of music and mischief banished to animal form after losing a bet with Apollo. Is it true? Who knows? Historians still argue whether this goat even existed in the earliest versions of the myth, or whether later storytellers added it for flair. But one thing's certain without that goat. The moment wouldn't have felt complete. Hermes thinks so too. You watch as he sits up, dusts off his hands, and plays a short, soft melody. It's not for the gods, it's not for the cows, it's for the goat. And the goat in return lets out the most contented snort you've ever heard. Apollo joins the scene moments later, drawn by the sound. His golden lyre is now slung across his back like a divine guitar. He kneels beside Hermes, watches, listens. The two gods, so different sunlight and shadow order and chaos, share a moment. Hermes passes his fingers across the strings again. Apollo echoes the melody. They nod in sync. It's not just music anymore, it's conversation. Historically, there's a fascinating intersection here. Greek myths weren't just bedtime stories, they were also blueprints for relationships between humans. Gods, nature, and the arts. The lyre, and this strange harmony between Hermes and Apollo, marks one of the few times trickery leads to peace and mischief, becomes a bridge, not a wedge. The goat lies down. You lie down. The breeze shifts warm and slow. And in this rare silence, you hear it music drifting from the gods, the hills, the hooves of one very talented, very underappreciated goat. Just as your eyes begin to close, you catch Hermes smirking. Don't tell anyone, he whispers to you. But the goat was the best part. You wake or maybe dream deeper as Hermes and Apollo sit cross-legged in the dust, their lyres resting across their laps like old friends. The sun glints off the strings, casting wobbly shadows shaped like spiderwebs and secrets. And you realize this isn't just a music lesson anymore, it's a trade deal written in sound. Apollo's still not quite over the fact that a toddler punked him out of 50 cows clears his throat. So, I keep the lyre. And in exchange you want what? Hermes grins. A wand, one that keeps things balanced, and maybe a few side perks. You watch as Apollo pulls out the staff. It's plain at first just wood, but as he passes it over, it warps in Hermes' fingers. Snakes coil around it. Wings sprout from the top. It vibrates with that strange divine hum, the sound of contracts and crossroads and very confident lying. That's the Caduceus now. And Hermes? He's not just the god of sneaky baby tricks anymore. He's officially the messenger of the gods, protector of travelers, inventor of coinage, and professional boundary pusher. To seal the deal, Apollo also hands Hermes a golden olive. You blink. What now? Yes, a golden olive. Not a tree, just the fruit. Gleaming like the sun itself, completely impractical, and yet it radiates peace. Apollo offers it not with words, but with music. He plays a slow arpeggio on his new lyre, the notes tumbling like falling petals, and you feel something ancient settle in the air. See, in myth, olives are more than snacks or garnish for tragic Greek salads. They're symbols of wisdom, diplomacy, and sacred truce. And golden ones. That's next-level peace treaty energy. It's Apollo's way of saying, I forgive you, kind of. Maybe. Fringe scholars claim this olive gift was symbolic of the first unspoken rules of divine diplomacy. That somewhere in the tension between music and mischief, between light and shadow, the gods started agreeing on boundaries. Or at least on when not to throw lightning bolts at each other over stolen cows. And Hermes being Hermes doesn't just accept the olive. He eats it, swallows the whole thing. Gold and all, just to mess with Apollo. You try not to laugh, but Apollo rolls his eyes with the full weight of someone who knows this is only the beginning of a very long sibling-like rivalry. He gets up, dusts off his knees, and heads off to deliver a few prophecies, leaving Hermes with the lyre's echo still ringing in the air. Hermes looks satisfied. Not because he won, but because now he has a symbol, a title, and a shiny new wand with snakes on it. And maybe, just maybe, a goat friend for life. Historians still debate how much of this myth was intended as cosmic comedy, and how much was mythic instruction. Was Hermes a metaphor for innovation? Was Apollo a symbol of reluctant adaptation? One theory even suggests the lyre trade represents the cultural shift from oral storytelling to formal poetry, from chaos to structure. But you're lying in a sunny field with a goat on one side and a trickster god on the other. The grass hums. The air tastes like figs and mischief. And above you, two gods who should be enemies have found, if not friendship, then at least a rhythm they can share. You linger in the afternoon hush, the kind of hush only ancient hills can hold a lull, where even cicadas dare not chirp. Hermes lounges nearby the caduceus, balanced effortlessly across his chest, while the goat chews meditatively on a sprig of something vaguely sacred. Apollo's music has long since faded down the mountain, but its notes still echo faintly in your bones. Now it's time for a little detour. Because this goat business, it runs deep. You sit up, brush the olive leaves from your elbows, and follow Hermes as he begins to talk quietly, almost reverently, about the ancient connection between gods and goats. They always show up, he mutters at the edges of stories. Half in, half out. Kind of like me. And he's not wrong. In ancient Greece, goats weren't just livestock. They were mythic participants. Sacred to multiple gods, they were associated with Dionysus. Party god, wine enthusiast, probable chaos gremlin with Artemis Huntress Wilderness, queen, certified introvert, and even with Pan, the half-goat god of wild music and jump scares. Pan's pipes, carved from reeds and desperation, were the rustic cousin of Hermes' lyre. Some say it was Pan, not Hermes, who first taught rhythm to goats, making them tap out beat patterns in dirt and echo chambers of cliffs. Fringe scholars, usually the ones at the bottom of academic wine barrels, insist that certain herds were musically trained, responding only to flute cues. And that's not even the weirdest part. There are carvings, old ones, like really old, that show goats in poses, far too coordinated to be accidental dancing. Turning sometimes in circles, sometimes in lines. Were they real dramatic artists projecting onto stone? No one knows, but you start to suspect the goat beside you is trying very hard not to look smug. Historians still argue whether these images reflect early rituals, agricultural festivals, or just evidence that humanity's first rave involved goat choreography. Hermes picks up a twig, plays a few notes on it like a panpipe, and the goat twitches its ears in time. Coincidence maybe, but you're not betting against it. And then there's Amalthea. The name rings like a distant bell. She's the divine goat said to have nursed baby Zeus on Crete, hidden away in a cave, while Cronus was out eating his own children like it was a competitive buffet. Amalthea's milk saved the king of gods. Her horn, snapped off by accident, became the cornucopia symbol of abundance. Goats again, at the root of creation. You glance sideways at Hermes. So, what's the deal, why goats? He smiles. Because they're stubborn. They climb everything. They do what they want. And yet somehow people still keep following them up mountains. That's when it clicks goats aren't just livestock. They're metaphors with hooves. In Greek myths, animals weren't merely props. They were signals. Markers of divine presence or disruption. Snakes, bulls, owls, lions, they all had their roles. But goats stood at the edge. Half tame, half wild, and always watching. The lyre might have been born of turtle and sinew, but the rhythm? That tapping beat, the instinct to play, that might have come from a goat. You lie back in the grass, the sky turning buttery orange above you. Hermes hums beside you. The goat for once rests. And for just a moment you feel the myth settle around you, like a warm breeze, wild, ancient, and just a little bit stubborn. Dusk descends like velvet across the hills, soft and slow and stained with amber. The goat curls beside you, twitching occasionally in its sleep, maybe dreaming of rhythmic hooves and celestial grazing. Hermes, though, he's very much awake. You glance over as he pulls his caduceus from the grass and stands stretching like a cat, who's just remembered they rule the world. All right, he says with a wink, want to see something the other gods don't talk about. You rise and follow him, because of course you do. And soon you're weaving through shadows that feel less like nightfall and more like secrets. The trees grow twisted here, like they've been eavesdropping on divine gossip for centuries. And ahead, nestled between two craggy cliffs, is a door made entirely of moonlight and dew. Hermes steps through it like it's nothing. You, however, get a chill down your spine. It smells like sandalwood old books and mischief. Welcome to Hermes' other realm, not Olympus. Not the fields of myth, but a hidden, lesser-known corner of divine reality, his secret club of nightwalkers, boundary dwellers, messengers, and thieves. This isn't a temple, it's a network, and it runs on whispers. You walk among them, figures draped in fog and starlight. Some human, some less so. A woman with wings where her ears should be. A boy with shoes made entirely of coin. A laughing old man holding a scroll that writes itself. Every one of them touched by Hermes. Guided, protected, or inspired by the god of crossroads. There are symbols scratched into the stones here. Crooked arrows, stylized wings. Goat hooves pressed into clay. They glow faintly in the dark, pulsing to a rhythm you can't hear but feel in your ribs. Fun historical fact. Hermes wasn't just the god of thieves and travelers, he was also believed to guide souls to the underworld. A psychopomp, if you want the technical term, which, let's be honest, sounds like a goth jazz band. His job wasn't judgment, it was movement, transition, boundaries. And those who lived in between messengers, tricksters, dreamers were his people. One fringe scholar once claimed that the original temples to Hermes were never built in cities, but at crossroads places where decisions had to be made. It's poetic, really. Worshipping a god not in certainty, but in uncertainty. Here in his secret domain, Hermes shows you a wall. On it, etched into silver bark, are names. Thousands of them. People who chose the in-between. Artists, smugglers, inventors, poets. Kids who lied to their parents to go chase a comet. Your name's not there, but you wonder maybe one day. Hermes says nothing, just smirks. Offers you a grape from his sleeve, where did that come from, and turns to go. Historians still argue whether these cults of Hermes were ever real small sects of travelers and tradesfolk who invoked his name in secret, leaving offerings not at altars, but at border stones and behind shutters. Some evidence suggests coins marked with winged sandals were tucked into travelers' shoes for protection. Whether true or not, the idea persists that Hermes doesn't demand worship. He just shows up. When you're lost, or late, or lying, or laughing when you absolutely shouldn't be. You follow him out of the hidden place. The moon is high now, the goat's still snoring. Hermes looks over his shoulder and grins. Nice folks, huh? You nod, not quite trusting your voice. The air smells like nighttime and new beginnings. And somewhere far off, a lyre string hums. The moon is a perfect coin in the sky, flipping silently through the clouds like it's trying to decide between heads and tails. You and Hermes sit on a wide, flat stone, its surface still warm from the sun, and watch as the hills stretch out below like ripples on an old cloak. And then faint, almost not there, you hear it. The lyre, but not the one Hermes made. No, this is different. Fuller. More polished. It's Apollo, and he's been busy. You drift toward the sound, your feet barely touching the earth. The melody pulls you downhill past sleepy olive groves and trees that nod their approval. When you reach the clearing, you stop. There he is, Apollo, bathed in silver light, playing the lyre as though it's a living thing. The goats are gone, the cows are sleeping, but the music. The music has evolved. Where Hermes' version was playful and raw, the musical equivalent of finger painting with wild berries, Apollo's is refined, every note calculated, every pause intentional. He's turned chaos into form, and it's beautiful. The lyre he holds is no longer a hacked-together turtle shell with a dream. It's been upgraded. Polished wood. Inlaid with gold. Strings that shimmer like threads pulled from the edges of clouds. There's even a little sun carved into the base because of course there is. Apollo's nothing if not on brand. This is no longer just an instrument, it's a symbol of power, of order, of prophecy. Historically, this transformation reflects how the Greeks viewed music not just as entertainment, but as a force, a cosmic architecture. Philosophers like Pythagoras believed music echoed the very structure of the universe, math and harmony entwined. And the lyre became the embodiment of that harmony. You watch Apollo close his eyes lost in the rhythm. His fingers dance. The air around him shimmers, and in that moment the world aligns. But here's the thing, remember that, goat. The rhythm Apollo plays, it still has that beat, that subtle tapping pulse you first heard back in Hermes' cave. It's been refined, sure, but the bones of it, the soul of it, still belongs to the wild. That's the secret. Apollo didn't erase Hermes' chaos. He channeled it, structured it, translated it for temples and oracles and poetry contests. Fringe historians have even pointed out that the most revered lyre players of antiquity weren't just musicians, they were seers, oracles. Some believed the lyre could summon divine visions. Others said the right song could heal madness or calm storms. A few even claimed it could make a goat sing. No proof, but one goat did hum once. You settle beside Apollo quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. His music weaves around you like a soft blanket, and as you listen, you understand the lyre's journey from tortoiseshell to sacred relic wasn't just an upgrade, it was a transformation. From goat string to gold string, from dirt floor jam session to cosmic symphony. And yet, it's still the same song. You smile. Because that's the funny thing about myths. They don't replace old stories, they build on them. Layer by layer. Chaos becomes order, mischief becomes art, and sometimes a stolen cow becomes a lullaby. The music fades. Apollo lowers the lyre and gives you the smallest of nods. Not regal, not divine, just human. You nod back, then turn toward the path. You walk slowly, feet brushing through lavender, and time the night now thick with stars, so many they feel like pinpricks in a great dark blanket, stitched by some half-blind goddess with a flair for the dramatic. Behind you, Apollo's last notes still echo curling through the hills like smoke that forgot it needed fire. But ahead lies the reason this whole story began. You return to the place it started, Hermes' cave. Quiet now. No cow tracks, no musical pranks, just the wind curling through pine trees and the faint smell of sheep. Gut and legend. The goat is here, of course. Where else would it be? It glances up, then settles its head against a rock like it's watching the last scene of a film it's seen 100 times but still enjoys. Hermes is waiting sitting on a boulder, legs swinging like a kid on a playground bench. His lyre, the original one, is in his lap. The turtle shell's a bit cracked, now the string's slightly frayed, but it still hums with possibility. He plucks one note, then another. You sit down beside him. Together you listen to the night, and that's when you notice all around Greece, yes, all around you hear it. Not just Apollo's version, not just Hermes' goat rhythm, but everything. Children plucking homemade instruments, wandering poets singing under fig trees, lovers strumming lullabies at the edge of sleep. Old men with cracked voices humming the same tune they once heard during a summer that now feels like a myth. The lyre has become more than a god's toy. It's become ours. Across generations, centuries, civilizations. From temple steps to classroom desks. From ancient theaters to bedtime songs whispered in the dark. And maybe that's the real point of this ridiculous, beautiful, utterly goat-infused tale. That music, born from trickery, stubbornness, and a tortoise who did not sign up for this, became something soft. Something healing. Something we carry with us even when we don't know where the melody came from. Historians still debate whether Hermes invented the lyre alone or whether it evolved across cultures and got wrapped into myth later. Some argue the Sumerians had stringed instruments long before the Greeks. Others claim the story was crafted backwards, an explanation for a sound already sacred. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight the stars are out. The goat is asleep. And Hermes, who definitely knows you've been following this whole time, leans over and says, "You know, if you ever find yourself stuck between two choices, just listen. Music usually knows the way. You nod, close your eyes, and let the story settle. Wind down 300 words. Now your breathing softens. The world once spinning with gods and goats and golden olives has stilled. The air is cooler now, slower. Even the stars seem to blink a little less urgently. You lie back on the grass, the whisper of time brushing your arms. In the distance, the last echoes of the lyre fade into something gentler. Just a hum, maybe imagined. Maybe not. The goat beside you shifts in its sleep. Hermes has gone off to his next adventure, no doubt, but his footprints linger faintly in the dew, like secrets pressed into the earth. The sky above is vast and ancient. You feel small, not in a bad way, in a way that makes sense, like you're a part of the rhythm. One quiet beat in a song that's been playing since the first gods chuckled their way through creation. And slowly, steadily, your thoughts float downstream. You forget the details, the sandals, the cows, even the court case on Olympus. All that's left is the feeling, the music. That strange, simple magic born from chaos refined by fire, passed along by goats gods, and maybe you. So rest now, you've wandered far. Let the story dissolve. Let your breath match the rhythm of a sleeping world. You've earned this quiet. You're safe. You're home. And the music, it's still playing soft, steady, eternal. End of script. Sweet dreams.